Going on, everybody? Welcome to Distilling 101. Hope everybody's having a good weekend. It's like this week, next weekend is Farm to Bottle, so we won't be here next Saturday, but hopefully you'll be coming to Farm to Bottle and watching it there. So while I wait for everybody to trickle in here, I'm going to spread the love. There's that notification. Yeah, YouTube's pretty good. They're pretty quick about notifications. Facebook, not so much. So let's get these links shared and we'll get into it. Promised Charlton will do a little info on diastatic tonight. He was inquiring about his mash bill. He had some issues, and we talked a little bit about it last week. So we're going to get a little bit more in depth on it. Got a little bit more details on what's going on, so we can get into a little bit more detail on it once we get everybody in here. So I can't see y'all as you trickle in. Let me get these links out. Clint's not going to be with us tonight. He's working, making that money. Yeah, that's good. Glad he's getting out and making that money. I need to make some money. So bear with me while I get these links here. Shouldn't take but a minute or two. I'm sure they'll probably be the exact same amount. It's been the last 3 weeks. I've been able to do the exact same amount every time. So I'm just assuming they've made a hard line. I always thought it was strange. You could do more sometimes than others. And that really in the digital world, that's not supposed to happen. Everything is precise, right? So I don't know. That's what always led me to believe that there was somebody allowing more or not, or flipping a switch. Maybe on weekdays they allow more than weekends or vice versa. It's hard to say. But either way, just trying to get the word out so people can watch it on their favorite groups. But we get a lot of people on YouTube, which is good too. If you notice, I don't share it. We're sharing to Kick and Twitch. I know Damon does a lot on his, but I just don't fool with it anymore. We wasn't getting enough people in, and I'd say out of the handful of people that we got watching it, there were probably huge amounts of trolls and just not a lot of interest there. Maybe one day. I know a lot of friends of mine that game stream on there, and that's pretty cool. And I'm sure they'd probably like to be able to watch my podcast on that, but they'll have to come to one of these. Everybody's got YouTube and Facebook, just about. All right, just a few more and I'll be done. And I hate the dead air while I'm doing this. That's why I try to sit here and mumble on and ramble and go on for a while I'm doing it. Because I don't want dead air. People log in, they see me sitting here like this, and they don't hear anything. I'm like, damn, he's locked up, he's frozen, or this video's not going on. Let's see, a couple more, and they'll probably pull the rug out from under me. Well, here's where we found out. Yep, right here, let's see. No, they allowed it tonight, so we're going to get an extra one or two in. It's crazy. Hopefully, I didn't miss one. We'll see. Maybe somebody's listening. Well, there's a couple more. Damn. All right, so stopped on the Shiner family this week. Where's my pen? Okay, here we go. I just put the date out by it so I know which one I got to do it. Things like that. Forget everything. Got to do that kind of stuff. All right, now I can see y'all. What's going on, DW? Good to see you, brother. What's up, Cave Daddy? What's going on, Adam? Good to see everybody in here tonight. There's my man Brian from Cali. There's Curtis. Oh, I know, man. I felt that pain for a long time. Infidel Nation. Proud enemy of Islam. I like it. I also like that cross. Those crosses with the dent. That's the. I'm trying to think of what Crusaders though were. There's a special group of Crusaders that were like the special forces of the Crusaders. They were the baddest of the bad. When you saw them, the next thing you saw was a blade and death. But on each end of the cross, it had a V instead of going straight across. It had the V in it. I can't remember what their name was, but they were the badasses of the Crusaders. What's going on, Joe? Good to see you, brother. What's up, Jeff? Good to see you, man. That's Bear Wolf. What's up, JJ? I know, brother. I know. I put up with it for 63 years. I decided I had enough. I don't know. Since I've semi-retired, it seems like I'm busier now than I ever was. What's going on, Patty? Good to see you, brother. What's going on, Wade and Callie? Got quite a few West Coasters on here. I like it. I've wondered where the hell you been. Oh, been getting grill mastering. That's all right, brother. I've been wondering where the hell you were. Hey, Candy, how are you? I'm doing good. How are you? How are you doing? Kind of Great Smoky Mountains. I like it. You can hear me? That's good, brother. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit slow responding. I had to get these links out first, Candy. So I'll try to. I don't have Clint with me tonight, so I'm going to stay on the ball. What's going on, Steven? Good to see you, brother. From West Virginia. That's close to where I grew up. I grew up in Pike County, so that's right across the border, brother. Yeah, things in West Virginia. The old Teutonic Knights, yeah. They did. They were. Yeah. What's going on, Stephen? Good to see you, brother. There's OC Shine. St. James's Cross, yeah. There was certain ones, the Knights Templar, yeah. But there was certain Crusaders, and it was a group. It was kind of like the special forces of the Crusaders, but they had that special cross, and when you saw that, shit was about to hit the fan. What's going on, Dougster? Good to see you, bro. Yep, this next weekend I'll be at Far in the Bottle, so I hope to see a lot of people there. So when you see me, come up and introduce yourself, because it's hard for me to see everybody's faces on these little teeny tiny icons, but by your name. So What's going on, Mikey? So, waiting for Charlton to get in here. So he's the one that had the questions. So I wanted him to be in here to well, can I send the messages in my while I'm live? Yeah. Okay, cool. Say it popped up, a little pop up. I don't know. Crazy. So we'll wait for him to get in here and then we'll talk about, but we're going to talk about diastatic power in Lintner. And it's becoming less and less of an issue in distilling now that we have the, liquid high temp amylase and the liquid glucose. Fewer and fewer people are using and depending on the malts, and more, using and depending on the, seems like this thing's crooked all the time. Looks like my head's turned to the side. Looks like, so a lot of people used to depend on the malts to do the grain conversion. So, we're not going to talk about that, Bear, JJ. I just noticed just noticed the flag. Not going to go there because I know a lot of people, and you included, ain't going to like what I got to say about it. So let's just not go there. Going on down in Arkansas. Good to see you, brother. Yep, JJ, not the place and time, bro. But if you want to chat about it, you can send me messages, but you'll get mad at me because you don't want to hear what I have to say about that. I'm waiting for Charlie to get in here. Where you at, bro? But anyway, I will talk a little bit about Lintner. Anyway, so when you convert grain, there's a specific layer of the grain in corn. For example, I use corn as the example. There's a layer on the outside. I don't know if I have a picture of this or not. It's called the aileron layer. Aileron layer. I don't know. If I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of it. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah, perfect. I do have it. And it's slow to pull up, but we'll get her on here. Okay. So you see this. Well, let me move the chat out of the way here. So you see this like dark layer. You see the hull at the top. That's the husk. That's the hard part. And then you see this this dark layer right along the edge. Right inside that is what's called an aileron cell layer. And it's spelled Aleurone. Aileron cell layer. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that, probably butchering the pronunciation, but I've never heard anyone say it, so I'm just going on what my book reads. Yeah. Yeah, the corn porn. Let's see. Towards fishing, more. Oh, you talking about with the 4-jar setup? If that's what I'm thinking of, yeah, I thought I gave you the thumbs up. I mean, I didn't go into detail on it, but it looked like a pretty good little setup to me if it's the one I'm thinking of. Let me go over here and say. Now, the stainless milk can has been around for a long time. Yeah, absolutely. Those three, yeah. So yeah, those three will work just fine. Make sure you get the 2-inch tri clamp bulkhead fitting, and yeah, when you drill it, make sure you smooth it out and don't have any rough edges on that. But yeah, a lot of milk can stills out there, and that's perfectly fine, brother. Absolutely. Let's got a few comments. Yeah, I mean, how much is it? You should cut off the price right at the bottom on me. But what size is it and how much is it? I'll go ahead and let's see if I can put that pic up here. I'll screenshot it, show everybody what you're talking about. Well, let me open it up again. And let's see if, yeah, I can do it that way. Up. So 60 liter, $107, 60 liters. That's 15 gallons, I guess. 60. My math right. Yeah, 15. Shit. Yeah, 15 gallon. Yeah, that's not bad at all. Let me pull up what you shared though, and we can chat about that. All right. I'll talk about this corn and stuff here in a minute. But since you posed the question, yeah, we'll talk about it. Absolutely, brother. Okay, so this is traditionally known as the milk can type steel. There's a lot of them out there. There's some pretty good sized ones. I've seen some pretty large milk can type. Yeah, absolutely. No distraction at all, brother. That's what we're here for. That's our whole purpose, man. Yeah. So, I mean, I thought you already had it figured out, bro. I mean, that's a perfect little setup right there. Yeah, you just take your cap off there on the lid of your milk can, and you'll have to drill a hole and just a touch larger than the thread. So you can use those threads as your, cut out, just draw it, and then cut it right along that edge, and just test it and keep enlarging it with a little Dremel with the little burr, so you can kind of deburr and get all the burrs off there. Usually the cuts are pretty rough, and you want it kind of smooth against that bulkhead fitting. But yeah, and then make sure that you put their silicone will be on the outside on the top instead on the inside. So you'll have that nut going against the steel on the inside, and the silicone gasket will actually be on the outside on the very top, right? But yeah, that'll be a perfect little setup for you. Absolutely. And I think that was 100. That's about $20, and that's about, I don't know if there's had a price on that or not. Deboss generally about 125, I'm going to guess. So that's about 250. For about the same price you could be in a football bever. So that's your choices there. Either way, there's good steel. The bever football, you could get an 18 and a half for about that size. So you get a little bit larger, but both are perfectly good setups. Both could be used on a flat top or on a hot plate or on a turkey fryer, whatever you want to use. You can also weld in or use another bulkhead fitting in the side for an electrical if you wanted to go with electric, and that would work as well. Just get you a good stainless element and go right into the side, and if you didn't want to, you can put an end cap on it, or you could put a drain there, and the end of the tri clamp, whatever you wanted to do. Yeah, the milk can rigs. I think My High, which is out of business. Are they out of business? I thought somebody bought them. I saw somebody um, just not too long ago on one of the groups was talking. He was a younger guy. I think maybe he bought them out. So maybe they're trying to re get it going. Hello, Miss Tammy. No, you're not distracting at all, brother. That's 100% totally the reason we're here. is to answer your questions and to help you any way we can. What happens is if I don't, oh, you're on your way home from Pigeon Forge? All right, brother. Well, we're going to talk about it. You can watch us later. I'm going to go ahead and bring up your mash bill and we can talk about what was going on. I want to go ahead and do it tonight. And we'll talk about diastatic power and all this. But yeah, you pull it up later and watch it if you're not able to get in here and participate. But I will show people the mash bill that you got going. I think they saw it last week. And we're going to kind of delve into that. I did want to ask you while I got you on here, Charlton, the malted rye you got, is that a 2-row or a 6-row? And also the cherrywood smoked barley, is that malted? And if so, did it give you a lintner? And I'm probably sure you probably don't have it with you, so you're not going to be able to tell me what it is, but we'll still go over it. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I know it's going to be tough for you to participate. If you're driving, be careful, bro. Don't be texting and driving and doing all this at once. I know you're with your family and everybody, so be careful. But we'll go over it. I think basically the only thing that you had in there with any lintner at all was your malted barley, because the chocolate rye has definitely been denatured. The Munich rye, the chocolate rye is denatured. The Munich rye, I'm not sure if that's malted, and if it is a 2-row, so that's 140 lintner. Yeah, malted cherry smoke. Do you know what the lintner of it was by chance? Sometimes it'll have a very small amount, from the smoking. It kind of takes some away, but sometimes it leaves a little bit. A lot of times, if it gets to a certain temperature, I think it's 148 to 157 or something like that, or 158. 158 maybe is the range that most of these are used at. Don't know. Okay. I'm going to assume that it's probably 0, and we're just for the sake of what we're going over the math tonight. Does it? Oh yeah, the like it's kind of like the Digiboil and the T500s. Those are fine. When in at 155, it's perfect. That's right in between it, and keep it between 150, 55. That's why we say 150, 55, because that's a little bit tighter range inside the 147 to 158 or 150, something in that range. But I always go 150, 155. That way you're kind of in the middle of that range, and it's a little bit tighter, and you'll definitely, and that's what the powder, causes you to go for 155. So that's why I always use the 155 too, because I used to use that powder, and we've been over that. So we're going to go over the issues that you had, and it's a perfect example of what happens sometimes when you get multiple malts, and some of them have no diastatic, some do. You assume that most of them do, and they've been denatured, in the crystal malt process. Denatures the chocolate smoking malt, denatures. A lot of times when they're smoked, they get above temp, they get denatured unless you use a cool smoke, an indirect smoking where it's not around the direct heat. When to add pickling lime and not more yeast like I've done and you've done, it's easy to do, until it's what I did when I first started, stuck fermentation needs more yeast, and put more yeast in there and didn't get going. Guess my yeast is getting old. We need more. So I just kept adding yeast, and I came out with a really yeasty, horrible tasting distillate, but we drank it anyway because, definitely the liquid versus the powder was a big factor for sure. But we're going to go over all that. But anyway, getting back to the corn. So when you malt this corn, it activates this aileron layer. This aileron layer is what contains all the internal amylases that are endogenic to this corn kernel, right? What it's basically does is converts the starches in this endosperm. So you've got the horny endosperm, and then you got the flowery endosperm. So it first reacts with and you can see, in your corn, it's got that little lighter color on each side where you see this horny endosperm versus, I know it's hard to say that without comment, but the flowery endosperm. So the alpha first starts working on this flowery and horny endosperm, and it starts converting these starches. So you got alpha and beta amylase in here working at the same time. So it's breaking down these starches and creating energy for this seed or this kernel to produce a radical or a taproot. Basically, you can call it a taproot. It's called a radical. So it's giving energy. So the only source of energy for this kernel or this seed to produce this root to come out. Once you get some cotyledon leaves coming out, then of course it starts capturing energy from the sun, so it no longer needs the energy from the endosperm inside this seed. So once all that happens, it continues and consumes itself until it's all gone, and then it starts depending, of course, on photosynthesis. So what's going on, Trickster? So what happens is when we malt grains, we want to get it to the point where it sticks out the radical. That way we know that we've got some free amylase. We know we freed, because that amylase is locked up in that aileron layer right there. So once we unlock it, now that grain has alpha and beta amylase free. So we want to stop that process immediately, because we don't want it eating any of our starches, because that's where our sugar comes from. So we want to we want to activate the amylase in here, the natural endogenic amylase, the alpha and beta in the seed. But we also want to maintain as much as this flowery endosperm and horny endosperm, the starches, the complex sugars in this as we can. So as soon as that little radical comes out and it's like a 1/4 inch long, we want to stop. So we immediately pull the water away. We immediately start drying it out and trying to freeze that germination malting process. Same thing as germinating the seed. So we want to stop the malting process then. That way we don't get so much of the starches consumed. The longer you wait, the more starches get consumed, the longer that little radical is. And you start losing your efficacy. You start losing alcohol. You lose sugars, and you're using up enzymes to convert these sugars, and they get used up in the energy to produce this seed. So what happens is we stop this, and that malting process gives us enough amylase to convert the remaining amount of sugar in there in our mash, right? So when we malt corn, it can barely do itself. So it barely has enough to just convert its own, and sometimes not even enough to. But fortunately for the plant, it's already got that radical out. It's got the cotyledon leaves coming out. So it really doesn't need the rest of it. It gets eaten up, consumed. They, finishes making, probably energizes it to help make roots, tap roots, and so it's done. So when we use malted grains, we're doing the same thing. So in like a barley, we malt it, we get that little radical coming out, we stop it immediately and dry it out and get rid of it, because now we've activated the malts in there. So we'll get to that. So basically, if you don't have, so when you start adding other grains, let's show the grain bill, and we can start moving from there as well. So here's the grain bill. So we've got 45 pounds of corn, good corn, blue corn. We got 4 pounds, no diastatic in the corn. We got 4 pounds of chocolate rye, 0 diastatic. 4 pounds of Munich rye. I'm going to assume that that's a non-malted, and it's going to be 0. 4 pounds of malted barley, and he said it was 2 rows, so that's 140 at 140 degree Lintner. Lintner, Lintner is how this diastatic power is measured. And then we got 4 cherry wood, probably a 0, I'm assuming, maybe 60 if it's got some little bit, but we're going to assume 0. Smoked barley, it doesn't say anything about being malted, so we're going to assume 0. 7 pounds oats, 7 pounds golden wheat, 0, 0. So 30 to 35. We go on 30. 30 is the magic number. That's how many degrees Lintner you need for every pound of grain, right? So we've got 75 pounds of grain. Once you add all these up, we've got 75 pounds. So 75 times 30 equals 2,250. So 2,250 degrees Lintner is what we need. Okay. Now let's get the handy dandy calculator out. Now we see that he's got 4 pounds of 140. So 4 times 140 equals 560. So we can take 2,250 minus 560, and that equals 1690. 1690 divided by 30 equals 56. So we're going to need quite a bit more Lintner from other things to get the additional 1690. So let's look at for every pound of, like, let's just go, we'll stay on the 2-row. So how much more 2-row are we going to need to get the additional 1690? So let's see, 1690 divided by 30. So we're going to need, let's see here. So 140 times how many to get 1690? Let's just say 10 is going to be 1,400. So we're going to say, let's try 13. That'll be 1820. That'll be plenty. So let's just go a little less. Times 12. 1680. So 12 is going to be just a little bit under because we needed 1690 more, right? So, but if we add 12 more pounds, then we've got that much more grain that needs to convert itself to. So we're adding 12 more pounds. So we're going to have to probably overkill it. So we're going to need at least about 15 pounds of additional. So basically they say around 20% if you use a 6-row, about 25% if you use the 2-row, but we'll see about what it's going to take. So that'll give us how much of this addition you just use the malt itself to convert. So we've gotten, now then you got to figure on how much water to add. So we've got started out with 75 pounds and we've added 13 pounds additional pounds. So now we have 88. And if we're going to divide that by 2.5, because he's got 3 pounds per gallon here, which is going to be he was using powdered alpha. And I'll say the same thing. When I was using the powdered alpha, I always didn't get good conversions. It was never complete like what it is with the high temp alpha. So I never got real good completion of my conversions. So let's figure 88 divided by 2.5 equals 35.2. And that's about how many gallons of water you would use to get about 2.5 pounds. I will say when I was using the powdered alpha, I would go with 3 pounds of grain per gallon because I didn't get that good conversion, and adding, of course, more grain will give you more starches to start with, which will bring up your higher starting gravity, right? So if you want to get it 1070 to 1080, I was having to use that 3 pounds, right, with that shitty powdered alpha. Well, now that I'm using the high temp alpha, I get much, much better conversions, and it's much easier to work with. It's a game changer. So, and now that we have those exogenous enzymes, we really don't have to worry about what ratio of malts that we have. One of the biggest factors is I don't want this liquor to taste real malty, but I want to get a good conversion. there's no other choice than to use the exogenous enzymes, right? The high temp alpha or the powder or whatever. But because I don't want it tasting real malty. So what happens is when you use the malt, you're pretty much at the mercy of it, because you're going to get that malt flavor if you use enough malt to get the conversion, right? So some people love it, some people don't. And for people that don't want to go to the expense of using the malt, it's much cheaper to use this amylase to do the conversion. But to do it properly, you would probably have to use at least the 13 additional. So that's going to be a 17-pound total. And let's see, that's probably, well, let's see, 30 will be 88. And now that's rough, right at 20%, right? A little over. So that would fall perfectly in line with what we would need to use if it was a 2-row. About 25%. 20, if you don't want to do all this math, you can figure 20% 6-row or 25% 2-row. If you use a malted wheat, let me pull up this chart that I've got here somewhere. Let's see, did I make a, yeah, I did. So this chart right here, well, this is a different, oh no, that's a totally different chart. Not what I thought at all. That's a different statistic. That was something else I screenshotted last night. Okay, so it's not there. Let me see where I've got that. Yes, an FBI statistics on crime. Let's see. I know I've got that in here somewhere. I should have had it ready. Yes, that you'll see why I pulled it up. They look a lot alike. So, like red wheat malt, you're going to see it has a higher diastatic even than the 6-row, right? That's the white wheat malt. Well, doesn't show a 6-row. 6-row is 160. It's the same as a white wheat. The red wheat is a little higher at 180. It's about the highest you can get. So, but you'll look at some of these caramel down here, chocolates. Doesn't show the crystal malt, but it's 0 as well. Black malts, all those have 0. The Munich malt, it has a little bit of diastatic, but it's just not as much. It's been denatured slightly. Rye malt, it's going to have some, but I'm not sure with the rye malt if the rye malt if the rye he was talking about, the Munich rye, if it was actually malted or not. It didn't say malt, so I'm assuming not. But if it is, we can add that diastatic to it, right? So the magic number is 30, right? So we need 30 to 35. We just say 30. That's the minimum. And it's always, you never want to go under. Going over is never a problem, but you don't want to go under because you're going to underdo it. So 30 is the magic number. So you need 30 Littner power for every pound of grain in your grain bill. So that 30 is the magic number. That's the number to remember. Let me catch up and reading a little bit here. What's going on, Frank? Good to see you, brother. Working on it. That's good. That's good. Well, we're going to get that turned out. So what happened was he assumed that it had stopped working probably and was stuck because it got to 1.1. Kind of find out it didn't have enough of the beta glucanase or the beta amylase in the endogenic coming from the malt. He didn't use the liquid. So there just wasn't there enough to break up the starches. So let's show these starches and explain the starches and what they are and how we break them down. So this is amylopectin and an amylose. And we'll have both of these in most everything, every fruit and vegetable every grain that we use will have some combination of both of these. So they're not always one or the other. you're always going to have a combination of them, unless you're just doing pure sugar or pure glucose or something like that. Um, so an amylopectin is a little bit more branched and structured, you can see, and the amylose, that's actually one long strand. It doesn't have loops in it like that. That's just a spiral. It's just like a chain of pearls, basically. So each one of these pearls is a glucose molecule, and there's a glycosidic bond that holds those glucose molecules together. So every one of these little gray balls on here looks like a benzene ring is a glucose molecule. Now, what the alpha does is it goes in there and chops these from the outside in. It'll just chop them, so it breaks them all down, and then it'll leave large segments of chains. Right? Those are called oligosaccharides, anywhere between 3 and 12. So the alpha will go in there and it'll break all these down into strands of 3 to 12. Sometimes it'll be like that blind squirrel finding a nut. It'll chop one off, maybe two. So it'll create a monosaccharide or a disaccharide. That's something the yeast can eat. But all these other long chains that get chopped up off these, it still can't eat. So the alpha goes in, it chops them up randomly. It's not exactly random, but it looks random. There is some order to it, but it's not. It's kind of helter skelter. But anyway, it chops these up and then breaks them off, right? And just breaks the bond. Now the beta glucanase that's endogenic to these grains, or the liquid glucose that we pour it in, the exogenic that we pour in, we'll chop those smaller segments up into one or two. So, and the glucoamylase is very good. It chops almost all of them into one. Some of them will be two. Let me show you a little diagram of that, what that looks like once it gets chopped up. And it'll be a little easier to understand. Let me find that little. I like using pictures because it's a lot easier to explain. Well, daggone it. Where is that? It shows them. And it illustrates the ones where they're broken. And I know it's got to be in here. Daggone it. Am I in the right file? No, I am not. Let's see if it's in here. No, it is not here. Yeah, it's in this one. How in the world? All right, so let me find that. And just a minute. I know it's in here, so it's just a matter of time finding it. I got a lot of files to look at, so that's why it takes a while. I got a lot of files to share. I like sharing these. Daggone it, it's not showing me the picture, and I know that it's. I need to prepare for this a little better. And the pictures are awesome because it shows right where it breaks it up. That's not that one. Hell. I can't believe. Oh, here we go. Yeah, here we go. I can't believe I couldn't find it. Okay, so on this one, you can see, let's just look at the very top one. That's the beta amylase. And so you can see that it's broken up most of these in twos. The green, if you can see the little green, that means it's been broken between that bond to it, that adjoined it. So you'll see a little green and red too. That's a disaccharide. And that's basically what your beta will do. It'll break it up to a lot of disaccharides, some mono, but you'll still see some in the very middle of that didn't get broken up at all. So it's not real, and you can see it's maltose plus oligosaccharides. That's basically maltose is the disaccharide, and the oligosaccharide is that in the middle there that hasn't been debranched. So you can see how the alpha to the right of that will debranch that. Some of it will be, threes and fours, some twos, but a lot of it will still be threes, trisaccharides, and oligosaccharides, three or more. You can see the glucose just below that. The glucoamylase breaks them up, all green. So it's made monosaccharides out of every bit of that. So that's the difference in what the beta will do, and shows you how the alpha breaks them up, but not fully enough to get consumed. So if you just use the alpha amylase, you're not going to get much to convert at all. Much of the sugars converted at all. Some will, so you'll get some conversion. So you'll go, hypothetically, you had a 1070, so it'll stop at 1050 because you just didn't get that many. If you use a beta amylase and you got most of them, but not all of them, it might stop at a 1.1 or 1.05, and it's just not going to, or 005. It's just not going to ferment all the way down. Whereas if you use the glucoamylase, you start at 1070, it'll finish at 1.0000, or even dry, even less. So that's the difference in what these amylases do and how they break up these chains. And these are amylopectins, to start with. So it's the branched ones. It's not just the string. But that's basically how it breaks them all down. Now that's what I was showing is specific to the whole kernel. So if you buy cracked, you're not going to be able to utilize those grain. You will get some of the enzymes out of it, but you're not able to malt it, right? You're not able to get the malting process going. There's going to be some natural, but not enough to even worry about or consider because it would be so small amount. So you would have to malt it and go through the malting process and get that little shoot to come out, and to make it work properly, to get it activated. But you can cook up some cornmeal, cook it, gelatinize it, and you will get a little touch of amylase natural, but without the malting process, we're talking maybe 5%, less than 10 probably for sure. So you're not going to get much at all. But yeah, some will. Some absolutely will. Grog, huh? Well, that's what it is, brother. Now I understand what y'all were talking about. Moda. I was like, wait a minute. What's this? Now I know what she's talking about. So basically, so that's basically the grain conversion and the magic number in converting. If you want to just use malted grain, 30. So if you can get at least 30 lintner for each pound, then you'll be good. And each should be rated when you buy it at the brew store or wherever you get it. They should give you a degree lintner. If you get it at a malt shop, they might not. But just remember that the 2-row is generally 140. The 6-row is going to be 160, and your red wheat's going to be 180, and your white wheat's going to be 160. And a lot of your other ones may have some, but they're not going to be as significant. And you can just always refer back to the chart. But that's the magic of the conversion, and that's how, we can use natural enzymes from the malt to do the conversion, which is the old way. And you can get that malt flavor. Touching back on what I was talking about earlier, sometimes you just don't want to use 20% or 25% 2 or 6-row. You don't want that malty of flavor, or you just want to use corn. So you can just use the liquid high temp and the liquid gluco and not need the malt for conversion at all. And before these enzymes were created, basically you had to use the endogenic, the malts to do the conversions. Now we've got it where it's just a liquid, and it's natural. It's not a chemical, where they mix a bunch of chemicals together and come up with some enzyme that's going to do it. They're all pretty much naturally, they're bacteria or mold based, bacterial based. For a single malt, for a single malt, you just have to use a malted grain of any kind. But you're going to have to use a malt that's not been denatured, right? Unless you want to use the enzymes, which I would highly recommend anyway. But so you don't want to use necessarily a roast. If you do, you still got to have some unroasted to help do the conversion, right? Because the roasting process returns it to the diastatic to 0. Yeah, and not only sprout the corn and cook it at 155 for a day. That's the way it used to be. You had to cook that corn all day long because you couldn't get a bit above 155, 157 or 8 because you denature the alpha and the beta amylase inside the corn. So you had to cook it at that specific temperature for a long, 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 long time, and you would never get a good conversion. Nothing like what we get now. So it wouldn't gelatinize well, and it wouldn't convert well like it does now. So, gelatinizing at 185 plus, preferably plus, pouring boiling water over that meal or ground up corn and gelatinize it, keeping it at that temperature for 90 minutes to gelatinize it, and then use your high temperature alpha. You don't have to wait. I like to wait until I get my gelatinization before I add my high temp alpha amylase. You don't have to do that. You can lower the pH of it, get it to 5.3, boil it. Of course, you want to put you in your oyster shells if you're going to use those. Probably not as much needed for grain bills. Neither, if you're using malts, neither is nutrients. And in all corn, the corn will have enough nutrient probably to pretty much do it, but it's going to be slightly deficient, but really not enough to worry about. But if you did want to add in a few handfuls of crushed up bran flakes or some dead yeast hulls or something like that, that would be fine. DAP is also another consideration. But really with DAP, you have to be really extremely careful with dosage. It's really easy to use too much. And if you do, it can affect and will impart some bad flavors. So you definitely, if you're going to use DAP, that's fine, but definitely don't overdo the DAP. But if you get a stuck fermentation, don't throw a bunch of DAP in there at it either, because you're not going to have enough yeast living to consume that. And it's just going to be sitting there unused. And if it's unused, you're going to get that bad flavor from it because it never got consumed. So if you want to add some kind of nutrient mid-run like that, always just go with some bran flakes or some dead yeast hulls, or there's a lot of different ones. The natural ones I find a little better. The dead yeast hulls are probably the best, Yeah, I would like to have me a little whiteboard where I could draw. I like George had the whiteboard, and he could draw this stuff out, and it's that's kind of why I use the pictures to help people see it. I don't have the little whiteboard behind me. I guess I could probably do that. I don't know, maybe on a video or something if I were to do a how-to video. But yeah, it's basically what I try to explain it is it's starch, a big complex chain like that's basically like a pine branch, a little pine branch. So you got branches coming off and pine needles, right? So it's branched, and alpha just goes in there and starts cutting the branches up, right? But you still got needles, and those needles basically represent an oligosaccharide, 3 to 12 molecule chain, right? So it'll debranch them, but it doesn't take all those little pine needles up and chop them into small pieces. And that's why, when I explain it that way, it helps a little, but once you show the picture, let me turn this fan on. Get another one. Once you, I forgot to turn the chat back on. Once you, hope that's not too loud. I can't see it registering, but yeah, it definitely the way to go, is to use the high temp alpha. That way, again, you don't have to use X amount of malt, or you can use any combination you want and not really worry about it. And you don't have to count, and especially with a grain bill like what Charlton's using. That's a pretty large grain bill. That's very flavorful. It's for some people that like malt, it's going to be awesome. People that don't like malt probably not going to like it. I'm fine with malt. Um, so it's I'm not. I prefer the malt probably better. Absolutely with wheat. I like the wheat malted better than not. But I'm more fond of malt or even a rye than I am the sour mash. The sour mash is still good, but it's different. It's going to have a different flavor for you. No, I think the glucoamylase is a more complete. They do pretty much the same thing, but the glucoamylase, the exogenic gluco, will definitely finish it out where it'll break them up better. It's slightly better. Both work well. Both are efficient enough, but I think the yeast prefer. Uh, I think the yeast would prefer more of a. DAP is generally used more in fruit because generally with grains you have enough food there, and if it's an all corn, you're slightly deficient. Like I was saying, it's very slightly deficient. So if you wanted to add a handful of bran flakes or some dead yeast hulls, that would be plenty enough to make it very very happy. But it's not going to be nutrient deficient enough to where it's going to stress your yeast out. Right? They're going to find enough food. Um, Maybe slightly a little on the lean side, but it's not going to be a big stressor. But if you wanted to add enough, bran flakes to help it or dead yeast hulls, that would add a little flavor and make sure that all the yeast were perfectly happy. Um, but yeah, DAP is generally used more in fruits and other vegetables and things that don't have any nutrients at all in them, right? So, like if you're doing a potato mash, you're definitely going to want to add some nutrients to that because there's just no gan and fan in a potato. Um, so there's a lot of different ones like that you're going to even fruits and vegetables that you're going to, even if you convert the starches, yeah, you're still going to need it. But with a grain bill, especially if you have malts, you're definitely not going to need any nutrients. It's in the malt. But yeah, I like the gluco. It does better, but beta will be sufficient enough if you have enough, in the amounts and that lintner wise, and do it at the right temperatures and get a good conversion. It'll be fine. No problem, brother. Hey, that's what we're here for. So if anything I've said you not understand, you want me to clarify it, I will try to, clarify anything that we've talked about. 25, 30 pound apple brandy, 15 pounds of glucose, corn sugar, right? And 12 gallons, 1.1. Ooh, that's high. Ran off in a week. Yeah, they go pretty quick. Now you got to watch when you get a lot of sugar like that. When you get a high starting gravity, 1.1 is getting pretty high. Make sure you got those oyster shells in there because it will work off quickly and it can crash. pH can crash pretty easy. So you're going to add heads or tails, and just make sure that you either what you're adding. Make sure that your proof's less than 80, right? 80 proof or 40% ABV. But yeah, I generally don't save a lot of heads. I know a lot of people do, and there's nothing wrong with it. They'll save heads and tails and then combine them, and then when it's time to run, just put them all in a pot and run them. It's called an all faints run, FEINTS run, and they say that's great. But I generally do. What I don't get, I generally do tails. I'll take most of the higher heads out, and I don't use those ever again for anything but cleaners, fire starters. We talked about that. But from the mediocre heads down to the hearts into the tails, I'll if I'm aging, I'll hold those. If I'm going to store it and run it again, I'll keep those lower heads along with the tails. That's fine. But I don't like the real high heads. Um, I generally won't keep those, but it's okay too. But that's just a personal thing. There's no right or wrong. It's just personal preference. There is alcohol in there. I just don't want to fool with it. To me, it's more trouble than it's worth to get at. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And in lower heads, that's fine. But those high heads, I tend, like the 4 shots and the ones right next to that, I tend to not fool with those anymore. You got methanol in there and you got a lot of acetone and ethyl acetates. And I try to not to reuse those. That becomes cleaner and other things. But you can run them again. I've heard of people keeping all their heads, fours and everything, mixing it with their tails and doing all feints runs, making cuts when they do that. And they're amazed at how good it is. Me, I just generally say those low heads and the tails, and I'll put that in the next mash. And it definitely increases your production. Right. Right. Yeah. Definitely the term is cleaving. The beta and glucoaminase cleaves. So it's cleaving all these small oligosaccharides into mono and disaccharides. But for some reason, they don't call the alpha cleaving. They just call that debranching. So the alpha debranches and then the gluco and beta cleave. So that's just the terminology used. I don't know. I tend to say it's all cleaving, but technically the alpha D branches and the beta and the gluco cleave the bonds. No, you don't have to. You get the alpha and the beta in that one grain, so it's kind of being used at once, and that's why you really have to be tight with your temperatures. But with the liquid, no, you'll use the liquid high temp at 185. And then the liquid gluco amylase, just check your label because it'll say 140, 120, 110, 100. So it all varies. So just follow the manufacturer's suggested temperature to add those because it will vary. But most of your high temp alpha is 185 entry temp at that. And you can put it in as you're cooking your corn, but you can't go a whole lot above the 185 because you can denature even the high temp, which is another reason I tend to use it when I get pretty much gelatinized because I go over that temp. And it doesn't hurt the corn to gelatinize at that higher temperature if you don't add that high temp alpha amylase at the beginning. So I pH my water down to 5.3. I'll boil it. I'll, stir in that corn. I'll keep adding a little bit of water, hot boiling water to it to keep it above 185 for 90 minutes. And then once it's been 90 minutes and I see it's good and gelatinized, then I'll add that high temp alpha and stir it in. And it's like magic, man. You'll go from such a really thick mixture to a really thin, watery type mixture again. You'll wonder, how in the hell am I ever going to work this? And that's another way you can tell if your alpha is effective, because as it gets older, it becomes less and less effective. So you can dump that in there and stir it in. And if it's not getting thinned out pretty good, you can think, hey, I have had this about a year. So put a date on it when you get it, keep it in the fridge. I've had this about a year. Maybe I'm going to have to use maybe double the amount. And it's hard to use too much. You're really not going to affect flavor by using too much unless you get stupid, just dump in the whole package. But, just maybe double the dosage once it gets a little older. A couple of years older, you might have to use 3 or 4 years old, you might not be able to use it at all. You might have to buy more. That's why you really don't buy the huge packages of it or gallon jugs of it, because unless you run a lot, it doesn't take much. We're talking teaspoons, right? So it's not teaspoons and tablespoons. So it's not going, unless you run a lot, you're not going to use it all up before it goes bad. So the shelf life is probably 2 or 3 years if you keep it in the fridge, but it will become less effective over time. Right. Now, if the toasting temperatures get above 150, 55, your malt's denatured. It's not going to have it. Now, a lot of your smoked malts, we'll have it. Let's pull up that chart again. Let's see if damn it. Did I delete that chart? No, here we go. So you can see in the bottom here some of your caramel and chocolate malts and black malts that have been toasted. They're not going to have anything at all because they got denatured. Some malts won't be totally denatured, and they'll have some. But yeah, it just depends on the process and what was done. So, if they went in with a heavy toast and a high temperature, then it got denatured. You're not going to get any diastatic power out of it. You're just getting flavor. Not like chocolate. Oh, okay. So yeah, I mean, it'll tell you on the package, what if it has any lintner left to it, or if it has full lintner, it'll tell you on the package. So just refer to the package, and it'll tell you what your lintner is. Yeah, you definitely got to cook your corn first, get it gelatinized, add that high temp alpha at 185. Much more efficient than the powder at 155. So you can take that 3 pound of grain and go 2.25, 2.5. I recommend about 2.25. For me now works fine. Whereas I used to go 3, but it's that much more efficient, and I get as much alcohol, and I save almost 20% grain, right? So yeah, it saves money. It almost pays for itself, really. Yeah, DAP is meant for fermenting anything that doesn't have enough YAN and FAN, yeast assimilable nitrogen and free amino nitrogen. So if you don't have enough of that, DAP or some other nutrient is definitely going to be in the call. Fermax O, a lot of people use. The Fermax O is basically yeast holes. So if you want to get a cheap yeast and boil it, you can create your own Fermax O. It's organic. It's really good. You can use, like we talked about before, and I'll go over this again. In your yeast bed, at the very bottom of the ferment, once you're done, what you can do is you shake it all up. Once you've drained all the mash off, right, and you've got just that yeast bed, you can add some distilled water and just enough to it where you shake it all up and let it sit for about 20 minutes. After it sits for 20 minutes, that water is still going to be milky, right? So you add about a gallon or two on top of it. It's still going to be milky. So you siphon that off, all the milky water, into another jug. Don't throw it away. Save that milky water. So you'll save that. Then as it settles, you can put in another, gallon or two of water, shake it up real good, and just let it sit for 20 or 30 minutes until it all settles out. It shouldn't be as milky, but you'll see a little white layer on top of the yeast bed. So the yeast bed is generally going to be heavier and at the bottom, and then you'll see a little white layer on the top. So if you could take your siphon tube in there, and as you're siphoning off the water, just try to skim all that white off the top. And it doesn't hurt to get a little yeast bed in there with it. That's just going to be, a little bit of a nutrient, but you're getting mostly yeast and yeast holes when you do that, so you're going to get some good viable yeast and some yeast holes with it. And you can use that as a nutrient, and with your next fermentation, you can add that in. That's a lot. There's yeast in there, and you can propagate your yeast in there. Once that settles out entirely, the water will get clear, and then you can siphon off the water. You don't need all that water on there, but you want to keep it in the water, underwater. And you can feed a little bit of sugar from time to time if you want to keep them going and live. But well, Fermax for a lot of people is all the nutrients that they use. I mean, a lot of people just rely on the Fermax alone, and that's perfectly fine for them. So, I mean, and now they're finding that feeding your yeast over a period of time, step feeding over a period of time instead of all at once, is also preferable. So when you first get started, don't feed anything at all. Let it go for a little while because it's got some natural stuff in there, and then add a third every day or two, and then, add a third of what you normally would beginning wise every day or two, and kind of stretch it out. That way you don't get a big, huge burst of food in there and overfeed it. And then, and then it just not have as much food there at the end. So they find that step feeding is working well too. Yeah, you definitely want to be careful and not. That's one of the few um, nutrients that you can easily overdo. Whereas like Fermax O and yeast hulls, things of that nature, the bran flakes, you can't overdo those, but you can put enough extra bran flakes in there where it is going to affect your flavor. Probably in a good way if you like wheat, but it will have a little impart a little flavor at the same time. So a lot of people consider it a bonus. You just put in there a bunch, and people say, "How much?" Well, I don't know. It's there are scientific ways to calculate exactly how much nutrients and nitrogen you need, but it's a pretty big lab to require to do that. So we just kind of eyeball it when it comes to the bran flakes. That's just an old way of doing it without having to, use the DAP or the old yeast hulls or Fermax O. But yeah, there's lots of different forms of nutrients, for sure. Fermate O is probably one of the best. It's a little bit more expensive, but probably many consider it to be the best for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fermate O is definitely one of the best ones. And it's something you can't overdo, but it is a little costly, more costly than some of the others. Um, but yeah, you can use the yeast hulls, the dead yeast hulls that you save, and but I wouldn't stretch those out too far, too much, because it's not quite as probably as good as the other, and it's going to deplete. But yeah, it works well. Yeah, the 6 row is going to have more diastatic. It's only 20. You had 140 per pound, and the 6 row is going to have 160. But I will say the 2 row is going to give you better flavor than the 6 row. So that's the trade off. And most of your beer makers and everybody that knows definitely prefers the 2 row. The 6 row is more considered a distiller's malt, right? It's not a beer making malt. It's not as good on flavor. And I, yeah, and I know you're going for flavor. That went down the wrong way. I start talking before I drink, but I know you're going more for flavor, so I'd stick with the 2 row and just increase and use the high temp alpha and glucose. It's not going to hurt even with all the malts that you're using. And we're talking about just teaspoons, right? A couple teaspoonfuls. Well, with that much, maybe tablespoons, just go by whatever they say. But if you're going to use that malt, you cut back a little bit on your high temp. Well, I'd cut maybe back on the glucose, but the high temp, I definitely would use regular dosage just to make it easier to work with. Because, like I say, it goes from such a thick gel to such a watery um, mash. It's great. Let me go ahead and share these links. It's a little after 9, so let me share these links out there, and then we'll get back to it. Where did I stop? Okay, Shiner family. I think it's about got it. All right, good. We're done. Yeah, I mean, DAP's got a bad reputation because I think a lot of people use the garden DAP, right? They use the powder that you're supposed to dump on your garden. It has lots of urea and other things in it. I think it's kind of gotten a bad name from just the pure diammonium phosphate, but there is a specific type that you can get at your brew store that's used for winemaking and distilling, and it's a little bit different formulation. It's probably going to be a little more palatable, but yeah, don't go to to a farmer's feed store and get your diammonium phosphate. Definitely get that at the brew store. I'm telling you, man, I've been using bran flakes forever, and they store bought any store brand cheap. If you can find some that are expired, boxes of expired cereal, and say, hey, this is expired. How much you sell it for? They'll say, oh, we can't sell it. It's expensive. I said, no, it's not. It's just by its best buy, but I'm going to use it to slop my hogs. And they'll be like, well, okay, it's not going to hurt hogs or something like that. So they may sell it to you. Or I'm going to put it in a deer feeder or something like that, with give them a little supplement with my corn or something, and they'd probably be more apt. Okay, we'll sell those for quarter a box or something like that, and you can get a bunch of them that way. But some places you can go in, you can get these big, huge bags for just a couple few dollars, and it doesn't take a whole lot, and like I say, what you don't use, what doesn't get consumed as nutrient, becomes part of the mash, because that's flaked wheat. It's good stuff. Yeah, I agree too. Yeah, the Fermade, the Fermax O is probably the best. Fermade, Fermax, Fermosa. Yeah, it is Fermade, not Fermax. I guess has the DAP and Fermade. Yeah, I generally use more natural stuff, or what I had from yeast beds and boiled yeast or bramble eggs. What's going on, Spencer? Good to see you, brother. Well, I mean, yeah, you can definitely mix your malts and it still be a single malt coming from a barley. It's all malted barley, and even an unmalted barley if you wanted to add it to it. Just for the flavor. But yeah, it's still a single malt, right? Because it came from that one plant, right? Yeah, I was just saying, on his grain bill, it had like wheat and rye and oats and a pretty large grain bill. But yeah, any single malt, yeah, as long as you use that same plant. Yep. Right. Yeah, and I think they have a lot of different ones. But I definitely I've heard most people getting best results with O, and I like what O has. Um, yeah, and a lot of people like the all organic. They prefer the to go with the all organic. I wasn't aware that K was the mixture of the two, though. That's good to know. I don't buy any of that anymore. I do have some DAP that I use, and I use it sparingly. I use about half what they call for, because it is very easy to overdo. Yes, Wheaties will work. Yeah, it's flaked wheat. It's the same. Raisin bran is basically bran flakes with raisins as well. So yeah, any of those work fine. Raisins will help give it a little bit of supplemental other nutrients. It's not going to have the yan and fan that you need. You'll get that from the flaked wheat, the bran, but the but the raisins will give you some supplemental nutrients and flavor, and give it a little bit of softness as well. So they're good to use. They're expensive to use though, and you got to be careful using them. A lot of raisins will have wild yeast on it, and you want to make sure if you're going to use it, make sure those raisins go in at a higher temperature so you can kill all that off, because a lot of times you don't want that wild yeast. I like having only yeast in there that I know's in there, that I want in there. I don't mind wild yeast. I wanted to introduce it, and I want to know what species and specific variety of wild yeast it is, because I don't want to get calm yeast in there, and that's another wild yeast. And yeah, you definitely don't want to get that mixed up with that. Yeah, step feeding is the way to go for sure. Yeah, that's they're finding that's the best way to go. And they're saying don't even start with any nutrient at all. Wait a day or two, add a little bit. Wait a day or two, add a little bit. Add, and break it up. If you're going to break it up into quarters, then over 8-day period, every other day. A 25% every other day, so you get the 100% normal dosage. That's definitely the way to go. Well, that's how you make beer, bro. A lot of people they'll drink a lot of their mash. It's for me the must when I'm making a wine for a brandy. A lot of times it'll never make it to the boiler, man. If it's a good wine, it's like I'm just going to drink this. They're so flavorful. It's sometimes it's hard for me to boil it up. And then the Jeep parade, huh? Appreciate you, brother. Yeah, Wheaties will work. You put her all in there at once. Well, try step feeding it. They're saying that it's the best, JJ. Try breaking it up like you got a 2 week, right? So break it up, and that's 14 days. So break it up to a 25% every 3 days. So that'll get you up to 12 days, and then let it go after that. They say that's really the best way to do. And that's coming from a lot of big wineries and stuff. They're starting to do the step feeding process. I look forward to it, brother. Does it? I didn't know it was. I didn't know it was frosted. Uh oh. Yeah, they add sugar to it. Let's see if we're just standard brand flakes. Yeah, not as much. It does have some though. Definitely has some. Well, I didn't know they had added sugar to it. I didn't see the frosting on it. I usually see the frosted flakes. I guess those have a lot of sugar. What else can you ferment that'll give you chocolate notes? Well, that's a good question. Other than the malts, I know certain barrel aging sometimes gives certain chocolate, gives some kind of chocolate notes and tobacco notes, depending on the char. But I don't know. Let's just see. Yeah, I'd say it's your malts, dark malts. Yeah, chocolate malt, dark caramel, crystal malts, and roasted barleys. And I'm sure smoked. Some of the smoked stuff will give a little bit of maybe, but I don't know of anything else. I'm Googling it and I'm not seeing anything else here either. I'm not a real big, I haven't really done a lot of all that. I've never really been a big beer drinker, so I never got into doing a lot of the specialty malts and all that. I've done some uh, malt extracts and things like that, and I've done a little bit with them, but really not delved into the rabbit hole of if I did, I would probably do it to make a beer and not to distill because I'd be afraid that I was going to lose a lot. All right, let's see. See, we got some trolls in here to be banned. Is this a white nationalist channel? No, this is a distilling channel. We don't put up a talk either way on that. Biscuit, assisted living. No, but I'm all about banning trolls. Yep, gotta get them out of here. Sire's still around. Unless something happened recently I haven't heard of. But yeah, Sire's still around. Yeah, cocoa nibs. I'm glad you meant. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, actually using chocolate cocoa. Yeah. Yeah, man, we keep it clean in here, brother. We talk about distilling, making beer and wine. We don't care who comes in here as long as they're chill and keep on topic. We don't talk about politics, religion, and all that shit. We try to keep it clean. And I'm sorry, I'm behind in my chat, so I didn't see all those people saying those things. So I try to handle questions as they come up, and I'm scrolling down and hitting every question as I go, and I didn't see a lot of that shit. So I apologize, and we're not about that at all here. Yeah, we're live. Corn, wheat, and oats. Yeah, man. A little barley. Yeah, I'm reading the chat, but I'm a little bit behind, bro. Yeah, I love my neighbors, unless they're bad. My neighbors like me. Yeah, I appreciate you, brother. I'm sorry about all that in here. We don't put up with that. I'm just behind on chat. I don't read them as they come out. I'm trying to answer questions as they go. No, moonshiners aren't. We got a lot of black shiners. We got a lot of Chinese shiners. We got people coming here from all over the world. No, that's just a stereotype. That's not true at all. We got people from all over. But I see we got a wave of trolls. A lot of times they all run together, so we'll just try to take them out as they get out of hand. But as long as you're all right, so you like racist moonshine? We don't talk about race in here, so we're gonna go ahead and get rid of you too. No, we talk about making shine. We don't get all political in here. Anybody wants to do that, I got a band hammer I can drop. How much methanol did I drink tonight? Well, considering I haven't had anything to drink tonight, I'd say probably none. But you get methanol in wine and even in the store bought bottles that you're buying. So there's a little science for you. But yeah, most of your 4 shots come off early, but there is little bits of methanol all the way out throughout the run. So yeah, you'll get them. I don't know where the hell they came from. It happens like that. A lot of times they're in little groups. They like to group together and work together, and they come in and, oh, we got us a new channel here. Let's go bombard this channel with a bunch of bullshit. And then they come in and we don't talk politics, Luna. We don't. I'm glad you MAGA. That's great and wonderful and everything, but we don't talk about it. This is one channel that we're going to get away from all that shit. You can't talk about anything on Facebook or YouTube or anything anymore without a lot of political and religious talk. And we want this to be a place people can come chill out, have a drink, and talk about something other than that, right? So we're going to keep that out of the chat. Moonshiners aren't racist. They're helpful. That's just stupid, man. I'm just going to ban you because you're stupid. Nah, I got it, brother. It's Saturday night. They have nothing better to do, so they get on these channels together and they group up and, oh, let's go hit this Distilling 101 channel. Let's give them hell and show how stupid we are. Yeah, actually, it's called a grain calculator, Becky. I was just looking at one earlier, actually on the DIY Shine and Steel Building page. In the featured section, Big Easy's come out with a grain calculator and multi-calculator and a lot of how-tos, got some recipes and stuff in there. And I'm pretty sure that it's got it in it. If not, there's just look up grain calculator and it'll talk about Lintner, and you can just enter in the number of pounds. Let me find you one. As a matter of fact, I was looking at them earlier. I'm almost turned my head from the damn chat right now. Well, Linda, you just locked yourself out. So anybody else got any stupid racist comments they want to make, go ahead and do them now. I got friends that are black and are on the show. So I don't, we don't go there. Well, definitely getting plenty of people to ban tonight. Scotty Spank Salati. Yeah, it's a real mature name. So people are stupid. Yeah, you can. Sweet corn is expensive, so a lot of your sweetness is already in it, so you don't really need to gelatinize. There's not a lot of starch to convert. It's already pretty sweet, but it contains a lot of water, so you're not going to add near as much water as you normally would. I just find sweet corn the best to grind up and put in your infuser, along with some cream corn, and save your money and use that sweet corn to eat, right? Because it's much better on the table than it is in the fermenter. But we can get as much sweetness out of a field corn starch as you can that's actually in the sweet corn itself with these conversions we've been talking about. So that's generally the best way to go about it. Yeah, we don't put up with that, man. The ones that are saying that shit are getting banned as they go. Yeah, that's what we're all about, taking questions. No, you're not 14, and I'm going to have to send you out as well. If you're 14, you don't belong in here. So, yeah. They're just baiting me to say stuff, 14. And if I said, oh, yeah, that's okay, then, of course, I get banned off of YouTube and Facebook and everything else for promoting underage drinking. I'm not stupid. Come on, people. Yep, that's exactly what they're trying to do, Sandra. Yep. I'll just ban them as they go. I'm not, no channel is responsible for comments like this being made in the chat, but I will try to ban it. If I miss anything, I'll have to scroll back and see if I missed anything to get rid of. But yeah, that's just stupidity, you know. I appreciate you, brother. Yeah, so back to sweet corn. Um, Best thing I found to do with sweet corn is to just cut it off the cob and, of course, cook it, put it off the cob and blend it up along with some cream corn and put that in an infuser. And you'll, for your corn liquor, and you'll get that real good corn flavor with it. But it's so expensive, it's almost cost prohibitive to buy sweet corn and then make a big mash with it because, we're using major poundage and you're probably going to end up having to use more because it's already got the water mixed with it. So it's best to use like a heirloom corn or a field corn that's starchy and use the amylase that we've talked about earlier and the indigenic enzymes in some of your malted grains to do your conversions and get the sugar out of that. That's the cheapest way to get the sweetness and the sugars. It's actually cheaper to derive the sugar from the corn than it is. Okay, yeah, they're still coming. And we'll just keep on banning. You have a lot of that's over, right? Yeah, I mean, put it in an infuser or in your thumper with it, with your tails, and it'll impart some good corn flavor for sure. Reddit people, I know they get in these little groups and they decide to go, you know, got your first child. Yeah, I think alcohol has been responsible for a lot of children for sure. Yeah, it is. It's terrible. And it's hard for me to talk now that I have to sit there and watch them. I've been talking about sweet corn for about 10 minutes now. But yeah, sweet corn. I mean, if you got a field of sweet corn and you got some that's oh yeah, well, it's not just one person; it's a lot of people. They do this. This is the best. This is all they have to do on a Saturday night. This is their idea of fun and entertainment. That's pretty pathetic, isn't it? But this is the only thing they have to do to enjoy themselves is to troll groups and stuff, and they get their jollies doing that. It's pretty stupid. Child, probably most of them are probably 14, like that dude said. And sorry I had to ban you, bro, but we don't allow kids in here, and I damn sure ain't gonna sit and say it's okay for 14-year-olds to be drinking. No, this the rules on this chat says 21 and up. So but it's been a while. We usually don't get that. Once every month or two, we'll get a little group of trolls. No, Joe. That distills out. It'll distill out of there. But I mean, you definitely don't want to fill your thumper up, right? When I say, at charging your thumper with it, you're just putting little bits in there at a time. Yeah, if you're a diabetic, it's not a good idea to drink, period. Yeah, yeah. I used to drink a lot of Jagermeister. They're fine. I mean, They do require long aging periods like a big barrel. That's kind of what they were designed to do, is mimic a slow aging process like a big barrel. So if you're wanting something that's going to do something in like a month or two, that's not the way to go. Uh, Maybe go with a all wood 5 gallon or 2 gallon, 2.5 small barrel that's all wood, but they're excellent barrels, and excellent for what they are. Uh, Bad Motivator, Hillbilly Glass Barrels, and Sandman, they all make them. They're all pretty much very similar. I think some of them may offer different woods on the heads, and others are just white oak. Not sure, hadn't really delved into it. I've got a couple. Um, One of them's got a bunch of autographs on it, so I won't be using it. Right? It's a memento from taking to a bunch of different ones, but yeah, just in the bottom, like if maybe 20% in the bottom, and then if you have it, it's good to have a drain on that thumper too. That way, halfway through the run, you can drain all that out because a lot of the alcohol's already been, out of it. And you're building up water. You can dump everything out and add some more tails back into it, and you can add that cream corn and other stuff too to help infuse a little bit of corn flavor in there. But definitely better to use those in smaller infusers like the jars or small copper. You know, I'm gonna have to scroll back, making sure I got them. Generic commenter. Do I think AI is better at making moonshine than me? Of course, AI makes the best moonshine to somebody that's drinking AI moonshine. Have I ever done LSD? Well, that's something I'm not going to talk about online, but I'm an old hippie. You figured out. Major poundage. I don't know what that. I'm sorry, Tora. Yeah, it sucks, man. I'm scrolling up looking for you, bro. I'm scrolling back and forth. I had to scroll to the bottom to make sure I got them all. I can't tolerate that kind of talk in my chat. I mean, we don't talk politics, we don't talk religion, we don't get involved. Like I was saying, you can't go anywhere these days without everything becoming hyper politicized, and there's nothing that anybody's going to say in this group that's going to all of a sudden say, "Oh, well, I'm glad you said that. I'm going to vote this way or I'm going to vote that way next time just because you said that." It never happens. So why do people try to convince other people and go to such great lengths to convince other people that they're wrong and you really need to do it my way, right? And it's just stupid. So I don't think I'm going to convince everybody, yeah, the electric Kool-Aid acid test. Yeah. Yeah, have a hair. You'd be hard pressed to find a hair, much less any drugs in it at this point. Well, I'm looking for you, brother. Let me scroll back here. Let me see. Yeah, it did go in a different direction quickly. I'm trying to find your questions. And that's what happens when they do these little. All right. I'm sorry, bro. Can you repeat the question? Yeah, repeat it, brother. So I look back, I couldn't find it on that one. I need to stay down here at the bottom so I can keep up with the new comments. 55 wooden. I would recommend filling it up all the way. What happens is a lot of times the top will dry out, the bottom will be moist, and you'll get cracks in it. It'll evaporate quicker. so it needs to be full and stay wet, and kind of rotate it a little bit from time to time, so it even the top where the bung is stays wet. So you want to kind of tilt it, not to where it'll leak, but yeah, you definitely want to be able to fill it all the way up. Yeah, and something that a lot of people don't think about, a good 15 and a half gallon fermenter is a keg, and a good place to store your liquor, 15 gallons at a time until you can get enough to put in a 53 if you want to get a full size barrel. But they make a 15-gallon barrel that's about the right size that takes about a year, 9 months to a year to age in, whereas a 5-gallon barrel is probably going to be about 3 to 5 months. So as the barrels get larger, it takes longer and longer because of surface area to liquid contact. So it's going to take longer and longer the bigger the barrel gets. Oh yeah, yeah. It as long as it doesn't, yeah, you can run mead in there. Wines and meads they'll keep for a long, long time. So unless it's got like bacteria floating on the top or something that's been exposed to air and got some bacteria, uh, even if it's or a vinegar, you don't want to do that if it's turned to vinegar or got bacteria on it. But other than that, you're fine. Owen glass. That's some good stuff right there. Every time I start a new mash, I go back and forth about adding sugar for higher ABV or sticking with the lower starting gravity to get less volume, better flavor. Yeah, it is. That is, and that's why a lot of people will use a dextrose. So instead of using a sugar, using a dextrose, which basically is a corn sugar, and it's a single molecule glucose, which stresses yeast a lot less, and they really love it, but it won't impart as much fire as using like a disaccharide, like a table sugar that's basically a fructose glucose molecule bonded together. So yeah, you'll get a little bit better luck with it, and really as long as you're not adding much, just bumping it up. Like if you got a 1060 and you wanted to get a 6.5 or at least a 7, bumping it up a little bit with glucose isn't going to be as harmful as using like a pure sugar. So that's why I keep a little glucose on hand. It's and it dissolves well, and it's usually pretty clean. It doesn't have a lot of calm yeast and other stuff in it, but I still recommend adding it to hot water and then making the addition with that. Yeah, yeah, and once you press your grains out and it comes out milky, let that sit. Let that sit overnight, and it'll settle, and then rack off the clears, the next day. And what's in the bottom is generally going to be what you want to use as a nutrient and as a yeast to start the next one. So there'll be a lot of yeast left in that bottom once it settles. That's why I was kind of talking about earlier, washing your yeast and kind of cleaning it and saving it for your next run and getting a little bit of the nutrients with it. Yeah, yeast holes, dead yeast. What are the lower gravities and right. You're asking him that. Yeah, it's better. I think it's better to not overdo it. Try not to get that 1090 or 1.1 or unless you're doing like a rum or something like that, then it's okay. Some brandy's okay. But for like, just a grain bill, 106070 is pretty much acceptable and good flavor. If you can get a 1080, you probably had 2.5, 3 pounds of grain, or you're just immaculate, conversion. But generally, 1070, is a pretty good target for, in between a 1060, which generally gives you more flavor. 1070 gives you a little bit more production. 1080 can tend to get a little on the hot side. So I think 1070 is a pretty good, middle range. But it takes a palate that can taste the difference in that. And if you use glucose, you're not going to get as much bite as you would sugar. Right. And having more sugar will cause pH to drop faster. In fact, yep. What's going on, Mr. Parker? Good to see you, brother. That sounds good. corn, 2-row barley and wheat. Got the cow. You gonna throw little oats in there to go with it? I like adding a little bit of oats. It softens it, so I like adding some oats to soften it up a little bit. Well, I mean, if you got a big 55-gallon drum, like a stainless drum, yeah. But yeah, you just have to save it up. Save it up in a keg, or if you got a big stainless steel drum, you can save it in that until you get enough. But yeah, keg, just start saving it and just dump your hearts in that keg, and eventually you'll have a 15-gallon ready to go into a 15-gallon barrel. You get 3 of them and a run, you'll be able to fill a 53. That'll be 45 plus one, be almost 60. So if you get 4 of them, you'll have more than enough. But yeah, it takes a while to build it up. But I like putting it in stainless or glass. I'm not real fond on storing liquor in plastic. We've been over that. Some people swear it's fine, and that's fine if they want to believe that way. But me personally, I definitely don't want to take the risk of microplastics and issues that can happen with those. So, and it's almost like that's a political argument these days, talking about microplastics. But there are certain things that are compounds in the 4 shots and heads that will break down. Not necessarily saying it's going to break off lots of particles of plastic and you're going to see plastic floating around everywhere, but it does break down the plastic and soften it. So there has to be some exchange, right? There has to be some being given up, even if it's on an atomic scale. You're still getting some microplastics, I would think. I'm just not going to take any chances personally. But that's just a personal decision. There's just too many stainless containers out there and glass containers. You can put it in beer bottles and liquor bottles and wine bottles and save it up that way. You don't have to go out and buy, mason jars. You can store it in all kinds of glass bottles. You can buy corks on Amazon and a little cork machine, and you can just put it in a wine bottle and cork it up and put it in the wine room and just say it's a wine. Nobody's knows the difference, right? Till they open it up and take a swig, right? But yeah, you can store it like that. It'll estrify. I get that's a little bit on the right. That's a good price. Fuel and them get a good price there too. But generally for a 50-pound bag, it's closer to 100. So 85 is a good price. But it's not something you use a lot of. So that $100 bag that'll last you years if you get decent conversions, because you're just putting a couple scoops in there every time. So, and it'll keep. Yep, corn and sugar, dextrose. It's just one glucose molecule. Yeah, that's good price for sure. Oh, Daniel. Yeah, pretty good fellas. That's awesome. Yep. Yeah, I don't. Some people, I say no and I teach no. I would rather be wrong and, and never have done it anyway than to be right and done it, right? So it's best just to dark glass is exactly right, brother. Just like old brown beer bottles, there's a reason that they brown them like that. That's to help keep the light out. So, or just store it in a dark room helps too. Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It's just more expensive, It's but at that dextrose price, it's still generally sugar. The beet sugars are like 70 cents a pound, and your uh, table sugar is going to be close to $1 a pound at a decent deal. Small, buying it small, and wholesale is going to be a lot cheaper. But yeah, the dextrose is definitely a good product. Sure, good, definitely good. Wow. Now, are we talking about mash? I'm talking about shine, not mash. Now, you definitely don't want put mash in something like that and seal it off, right? Using air, using air stop, uh, or air break. You definitely don't want to store it, store it up. Yeah, you get cheapest way to get sugars from corn, ain't it? JJ, no. That's why they make methanol or ethanol to power cars from corn. If they could get that from sugar cane, they'd be growing sugar cane, but it's a lot more expensive to do that way. Beets too. It's cheaper to get it from corn. Is Google updating on you, brother? Uh-oh. Other than a little bit of nutrients to go with that, that sounds great. Peaches and rolled oats give it a little softness, a little sugar to bump up the gravity to where you need it. You need a hydrometer though. That way you can get right. You can get that 107.080 where you want to be. Uh, but I would add probably, some old yeast, boiled yeast, or some Fermo, some kind of nutrient. You could add some raisin bran like we've been talking about. It's going to add a little flavor to it. So, but yeah, it'll be more of a peaches and cream, or maybe a peach cobbler taste that the oats will soften it and maybe give you a bit of that cobbler effect. But tell me how that happened, Frank. I don't mind at all. I've been fascinated with moonshine. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky where it was kind of a thing. In the cities it was never anything, but when you grow up in the mountains of Appalachia, you learn about moonshine, and I've been fascinated with it since I was a kid. Even in elementary school, we'd sit in the back of the class drawing cars, moonshine stills, right? That's just what we did. And I started shining at a pretty young age. I ain't going to talk about all that, but yeah, I did that as a hobby for a long time, man. But as far as what I do for a living, I was a real estate appraiser for 35 years before I retired. I used to be in construction. I built houses. I worked with remodeling, done a lot of, odd jobs and things like that before I went back to school, but ended up getting into real estate. Probably should have stuck with home building. I'd probably made more money for sure. But yeah, I praised real estate for 35 years, man. I was going to go pre med. When I originally went to college, I was going to become a doctor, and calculus happened. So, back then you had to have that calculus before you could get through. And nowadays it's not as critical. Nowadays I could have been a doctor, but I decided to get out of the science. But I still majored with my major is a Bachelor of Science with business options. So I'd already had so many science classes. I just went ahead and got the business option and a Bachelor of Science degree. So I had a lot of science, organic chemistry, and other chemistry and biology classes in college, in high school, and so yeah, kind of broadened my background, that and business both combined. Yeah, that's the combo sounds good, Eric. Yeah, we put it in plastic too back in the day, in milk jugs. Everybody put their whiskey in milk jugs, and then there was a public service announcement. I'm not sure if they didn't maybe change the formulation a little bit of the plastic milk jugs, but there was a public service announcement that it was a danger to keep your moonshine in these milk jugs. And they would get thinner, and they get real easy to bend in, and you could tell it was breaking down the plastic. And if it's not getting off into it, I'm not sure, but Um, yeah, it's something I'm not going to do, but there's public service because there's so much shine back there during the day in plastic. That's why a lot of people went to the glass mason jars because of that hazard. But we know there's what's the P, PCBs and other things. Let's see, what is it? Not PCB. PCBs were in older plastics as plasticizers and used as flame retardants for production was banned in 79. So back in the 70s, that's when they had polychlorinated biphenyls, PCBs, and that is what was in the plastic back then, and it wasn't good for you. So, but modern plastic doesn't have it in it, but I still, some people say that it doesn't break it down, but it does literally make the plastic softer, more pliable. So it's breaking it down in some form. I don't know if parts are coming off into the liquid or not, but it's still breaking it down. If it's breaking it out and thinning it, it's got to go somewhere. I don't know. I'd have to see it in the lab, but I'm still not going to drink it. It's just, why risk your health? There's plenty of glass out there. I'm not saying plastics are bad because, like in something that doesn't have anything in it, I'm perfectly fine with it. I wouldn't recommend anybody putting stuff in plastic and cooking it in the microwave. I do think that even the 2-liter jugs that were left outside in the sun with certain sweeteners in it back in the 80s and 90s, they talked about that and how it would come off a little bit. So I don't know. I'm just not going to take any chances. My health getting old enough as it is. I got to try to take care of myself as best I can. Yeah, and they put it in those PET bottles, that polyethyltoluene and that really thin, brittle plastic, and that was supposed to have been better, but still, no, I did the same. I wouldn't drink any of them if they came in a plastic. It always had to be glass. Was an apple brandy? Hmm, that's crazy, bro. No post flavor, nothing. That's crazy. Now, was it in the sun, or I'm just curious as to why it would have broken like that. Let me see. Wow, that's crazy, bro. That's crazy. Can't believe it broke like that. Well, still generally a pretty safe way to do it. No, there's a lot of people out there that know a lot more about it than me, but they just don't have time to get on here and chat and drink with everybody twice a week. I just enjoy getting on here and chatting about it and teaching what I know. I have a little bit of knowledge on it, but there's a lot of people out there know far, far, far more than I do about it. But they're too busy to help teach everybody. That's crazy. Yeah, the heat change. That's wild, bro. I've always kept mine inside the basement and it's been pretty much a constant temp. But I think I'll get some beer kegs. That's the best storage, long term storage without having to worry about it. Just wash them out real good, star sand them, and rinse them out real good and clean them up. Make sure you don't get any stale beer or anything in there, and clean them good. And that's one reason I didn't like the keg steels back in the day, was because I didn't have a big ferrule welded on it where I could get in there and scrub. I pretty much limited to what I could hit with the car one at the car wash. Yeah, yeah, that would be fine. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of apple ryes and peach ryes, and rye is a good combination for your split brandy, and if you like rye, and when I add a little spice to it. But I think that oats and peach and oats will give you a good, peaches and cream or a peach cobbler effect. Yeah, I'd say for temporary storage. Yeah, any plastic's going to be fine for like just catching off something and then putting in something else, or for hours. I'm talking about more longer term storage. For a very short period of time, I wouldn't be that concerned about it. I would still use glass if I had it available, but if I had to use something like that and I didn't have a choice, then I would definitely use the bucket for a short period of time and then pour it into something else that was more suitable. Yeah. Right. Well, and windshield wiper fluid, I'm not sure if that's just pure ethanol in there, but it's not the ethanol that's the issue, JJ. It's the acetone and the ethyl acetates. Those, the ethanol alone really won't break down LDPE and HDP or even PET. But the acetone and the ethyl acetates will over time soften them. They say it doesn't break it down to where it just dissolves, but it does thin them and make them more pliable. And for it to have that impact on it, it's got to be breaking down it, molecular structure, right? So somehow it's breaking down some things. I don't know if it's atomically transferring and some of the polymers actually joining with some of the ethyl acetates and acetones and actual pieces of plastic coming off. Um, I'm just not going to take any chances. But yeah, for short periods, putting it in some PET or something, LDPE or HDPE, it's not going to be a big issue just to catch it and put it in something else. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Where I grew up, it's just part of growing up, and that's why they talk about it. Even in my science classes and stuff, they would talk about it and talk about the dangers and what you don't want to do because they knew that we were going to do it, right? Because it's just something a lot of people did back there. If I were in, some city, in Pennsylvania, they probably wouldn't talk about it as much, or in Columbus, Ohio, probably wouldn't talk about it as much as being right in the middle of Appalachia, but it was fairly common there. So it's something that we talked about a little bit more and why they had those public service announcements there as well. Yeah, yeah, I agree. And, all the plastics are pretty much, they're a lot of based on petroleum based, so yeah, I agree. Yeah, you put it in a bucket for a very short period of time. It's okay. I would rather not. I catch it in a jar, and I put that jar inside a stainless steel pot. That way, if I'm on Facebook and it overruns, then it's just going to catch it in the stainless steel pot. So I try to eliminate plastic as best I can. So mine doesn't use touch plastic ever, but if somebody had to and put it in a bucket just to catch it off and carry it, put it in the truck, drove it home, and then started jarring it up, that wouldn't bother me as much. But if they let it sit in the garage for, a year or two, 6 months or a year or two or something like that, then yeah, I'm not drinking. Or to like put it in a pouch, right? Take to a festival, put it in a little pouch. That way you don't have to big heavy glass thing. Just in a little pouch, you're going to drink it within hours, or that day. Fine. But as far as storing it in that pouch in the fridge and then drinking it 2 years later, I've got some of those and from some dear friends that have signed their name on it and I'll probably keep those forever as a little memento, but I won't drink them then. All right, that'll work. Yeah, yeah. That's why I'm starting to think kegs because those little glass carboys, 5 gallon glass carboys ain't cheap. So I'm thinking, kegs, you can get a keg for 35, $40. That's 15 gallons of stainless storage. Might just be the way to go. And you can cap them off. You got the 2 inch, put your ferrule on there with that little gasket and put the end cap on there and you can cap her off. But best thing stored in is a wood barrel or a hillbilly glass barrel or sand mow or bad mow or one of those. That's a barrel, or a jar with some wood in it. Absolutely. It's free to join. They do have a paid option, but definitely free to join. And I will say, if there is legislation, a lot of times, and I'll use this as an example. Just recently, some of you and some of you may not know that there's been some court cases as far as gun ownership and suppressor ownership and the taxes on it. So the government decided that they were going to take the tax off of suppressors and SBRs, and when they did that, they lost their ruling power because it was no longer a tax issue, and the tax issue is the only reason they were actually able to regulate it in the first place. So now suppressors, you don't have to have the NFA tax stamp anymore. You don't have to pay the $200 tax stamp fee anymore, and Silencer Shop and another Guns of America brought suit against the government, and in that case they won. The government never answered, so they basically were a no-show, and they got the judgment. This happened this past week. So they got the judgment, and I think there's 27 states now that you can buy suppressor without the NFA Form 4. So that doesn't mean the dealers are going to do it that way. Some dealers are still going to do Form 4 because they're afraid that they may change, and if they do, then the ATF might take their FFL's way. So, but technically, in 27 states where the states don't have any state laws pertaining to suppressors other than the federal laws, then you're going to be able to get them only if you're a member of the Silencer Shop or the Guns of America. It's only two people it applies to. Everybody else still has to do it until they either become a plaintiff or another court case is held to determine that everybody falls under it. Same thing with the Hobby Distillers Association. If something were to happen with their lawsuits, only the people that were in the Hobby Distiller Association would be able to take advantage of that new law if it was based on a suit that they brought as a plaintiff. So might pay off in the long run to be a member. Plus, it's free and a lot of good information on there. A lot of people to share information with, and definitely a good thing to do. And if you want to contribute some money every once in a while, you don't have to join the page. You can contribute, and hopefully they'll try to help get some legislation. Yeah, that's a ticket. Yeah, a gas can. Yeah, or just a Clorox bottle, right? No. Uh, yeah, I can't believe that broke on you, brother. Now, did you have that top? Looks like there was a valve on the top of it or in the side of it. Was there a valve in it? Because if it might have been that valve, the actual cut. Yeah, you got to get them jars when they're on sale. Get them cheap jars. Also, going to a lot of yard sales with old people because old people keep jars. They hoard everything. Especially you get some of them 80, 90-year-olds, you might find some of them old green ball jars. But yeah, a lot of elderly and the family members, they come in, they take everything they want. they don't want one of them jars. They're always in some of these yard sales. You can come in there and walk out with cases and cases and boxes of jars. You can get your own rings and lids, put on them, and get them for next to nothing. 10 cents a piece for next to nothing. Silicone gaskets. Silicone's pretty inert. It's silicone is one of the more inert things. The PTFE is probably one of the most. It's probably the most inert, but silicone is probably right there next to it. PTFE is Teflon, um, but silicone's right there next to it. It's used in a lot of commercial distilleries as well. I talked to Alan Bishop, and his is like every 10 years or so they'd change it just because they wanted to, right? Just they didn't have to, but they could see that there was some degradation over like a 10-year period, and that's working it every day. So, and that's probably just due to the heat and not the chemical breakdown. But PTFE, if you want to buy those, they're the best as far as inertness, but they're not better than silicone as far as sealing wise. Sealing wise, where the silicone has a little bit of give to it, when that tri clamp goes on there, it kind of pinches it down. It does seal a little better. The PTFE is more of a plastic like substance. It's not plastic. It's PTFE. Looks like plastic, feels like plastic. It's not plastic. But it's probably might have plasticizers in it. I don't know, but it's totally inert, and probably doesn't seal as good. But as far as longevity, by far the best. I do know that if you're going to use like a keg in a column or anything coming off a keg, you'll probably want to use a silicone because it's got that flat side, and you really need that squeeze and that bite and that grip to really get a good seal. So I would definitely, but yeah, both are fine. Good question. Yeah, that's something they're working towards. It's in the works. So anybody, if you want to contribute, you can. It definitely helps pay those lawyers. Yeah, they love it. They just don't know how to make it. Yeah, the only plastic I've ever used is one of my graduated cylinders is a silicone based plastic, and I use it sometimes. That's about as close as I come to plastic. I just don't want to break my glass when. Let's see what we got here. Let's see if it's an important message. Oh, Clint's using his truck. His car is broke down. Wow, that's bizarre. That your glass cardboard breaking. Let's see if I can pull that off there and show. Hold on just a minute. I'm just curious if did you have the valve connected to the glass? Because when you cut that might have created a little, well, I don't see it in that picture. Might created a little weakness in it. I don't know, JJ. I don't know if there's any nylon in a PTFE. I know it's polymerized. Fluorospar, hydrofluoric acid, and chloroform through high temperature reactions and water, monomer, and a TFE. It's a tetrafluoroethylene, whereas a nylon is just a crude oil and petroleum using hydrophilic acid and hexamethylene diamine, which is going to be a little bit different than the PET. But it doesn't break down. It's pretty inert over a very long period of time. But I'm sure eventually it's going to dry out as well. Yeah, 4 of them, 15, 45, about 47, almost enough. 15 and a half. Oh, it was a keg that had the tap in. Okay. Yeah, let's see. So here it is. Full. And here it is broken. And that's next to the keg, but that's what just broke off the top, man. Just broke. I've never seen that unless it dropped or something. But yeah, that's it falling in on itself. So that had to have been a heat differential. Definitely. That sucks, bro. That's hard to see, man. 5 gallons of liquor, splash. Yeah, little, and that's one thing that rye was the best for. It made some of the best biscuit dough to patch up those holes with. I'm not a big fan of high rye. I like a little bit, but that rye paste is the best. Really? On the PTFEs or silicone? Yeah, they're pretty thin too. Yeah, it says on here that it's not made from nylon. Completely different synthetic polymers with distinct chemical structures and raw materials. Um, again, polytetrafluoroethylene, fluoroethylene, a fluoropolymer made from polymerizing tetrafluoroethylene, which is derived from fluorospar, hydrofluoric acid, and chloroform and water. Whereas nylon is a polyamide made from reacting the amines and dicarboxylic acids. I've always had trouble with that one, even with talking about carboxylating weed. It is a strong, silky thermoplastic used as an alternative to metals and other materials, but it lacks unique nonstick and high heat resistant properties of PTFE. So, no, it's not made from nylon. Yeah, the chipping, the physical damage is, I talked about last week with them. Um, the fact that they're rigid and they can be dented can cause them to leak. So that would be one of the, physical damage to them is probably one of the, the biggest factors, in determining their life. You're probably going to dent one before, it dry rots over a 20-year period or so. Um, Teflon's pretty inert. It's PTFE is very inert. It's one of the few things. If they made PTFE buckets, I would probably store liquor in it. That's how inert it is. But yeah, it's pretty expensive stuff. Nah, I don't think the gasket material's coming off. It's the PTFE is totally inert to it. It all has an A rating, whereas to even to the acetone. So if you wanted to create a bucket of PTFE and store acetone in it, you probably could. Whereas most plastics and other things, you wouldn't be able to. That's why it's generally put in specific plastics or glass. A lot of times your fingernail polish remover your wife has is going to be in a glass, container. It just keeps over a longer period of time that way. Yeah. I don't know though, man. It might get you constipated to eat too many gaskets. Just saying. You are the wife. Oh, that's good to know. Tora. I assume so. Tora. I didn't. Yeah, that's the biggest damage is damage. I agree. Getting it chipped or dented. They're easily dented. And that's probably going to be in, but they just don't seal as well as the silicone, as far as the tri-clamp gasket. So both has their benefits. The PTFE is definitely going to last you a lot longer. It's going to, unless you dent it, it's going to be more inert, but the silicone is going to seal better. But I will say, if it's harder to tell if you've got both of the ridges and the grooves on your gasket with a silicone versus a PTFE, because you can feel it lock in, right? Boom! You can feel it click right in there. Whereas with the silicone, with it being so pliable, it's harder to tell. So a lot of times you might get little leaks where you don't get your ridges lined up just right. But you got to take time. Oh yeah, definitely don't want to use leaded glass. In fact, a lot of the old glasses you don't want to use. Some of the old stuff, man. There's some stuff that actually use some. I don't know, not the carnival glass, but some of the colored glass from back in the old days used to use something slightly radioactive, like an iridium or something. It was what was that? Cobalt glass. Now be careful. You don't want to use old glass. Oh yeah, yeah. They had my daughter and stuff. They would talk about the pink slime meat at their school. They all hated it. It was gross. They didn't like it. Yeah, I don't think that's the yeah, I don't think that's the Bill Gates synthetic meat, but some of it might be. I don't know. Yeah, leaded crystal, leaded glass. Yeah, and I think it's a cobalt. Some of the old blue glass they used to put cobalt in to get it to color. A lot of that old colored glass just don't. It's good for sitting on the shelf and trading on eBay or something. But Carnival glass and all those, I definitely wouldn't use any of that old stuff. Nugget meat, Nuke glass. I think it was, let me see. Pretty sure it was Cobalt. Uranium glass from the Vaseline glass. You know, some of the glass that looked like Vaseline too. They actually had uranium in it. So yeah, and cobalt as well. So yeah, you don't want those. From the 1830s to the 1940s, and it's distinct, and it actually freaking glows in you know, under certain lights. But they called it Vaseline glass. It looks kind of translucent. Let's see if I can find a picture for y'all. Yeah, here's it. Is that under a black light or something? You can see. I'll just show both of these. This is from the Museum of Radiation and Radioactivity, so probably a pretty good source of info. But I'll pop it up there for you so you can see. It's crazy. A lot of people don't realize it. But, you know, even back in the old days, they would drink out of pewter cups, and some of these cups that were leaded, made with lead and stuff. And they wondered why all these, you know, aristocrats died early. I can only do 10 images at once. Let me get some of these out of here. So, you know, a lot of these, you know, rich kings and queens, they would drink out of these fine leaded cups while the peasants drank from the gourds. Guess who died first and went crazy first? Yeah. Poetic justice, huh? Here we go. But that's what Vaseline glass looks like. And I guess that's under a black light, it glowing like that. There's Clint. You off work, brother, or just on a break? We had some trolls in here tonight. Yep. Douglas, I have not been drinking anything tonight, man. I'm trying to take it easy on my liver because I know this weekend coming, I'm going to be getting pickled. So I'm trying to take it easy. My doctors told me I got to slow down. Quartzite, yep. Yeah, I've got a little carnival glass collection too. That's beautiful stuff. I love it. Some of it quite valuable. I've got some pretty nice pieces. You can go to some of these yard sales, and some of these younger generations, they have no idea what it is. It's all colory, and either they love it or they hate it. You know, and usually it's the hippies. Oh, I like them colors, multicolors. Oh man, it's awesome. But you know, a lot of times they're like, nah, you can get it for next to nothing. Yeah, but carnival glass, beautiful. Oh yeah, and so were the pipes and stuff we drank from, you know, and even the galvanized pipes that would rust. You're drinking all that rust and all those metal ions, and a lot of and then they switched to copper with leaded, you know, solder, and that was bad. And then some of those cans, they weren't lined, you know, with a plastic or anything to help keep it. You know, they'd rust and they'd seal it with lead, solder up the side with lead. Yeah, it's we've learned a lot. You know, that's why a lot of times people say, "Oh, well, they've done that. They've made moonshine and that for years. You know, it's okay." And I'm like, "Well, you know, they drink out of leaded cups once too, but that don't make it good." just because they did it at one time. I love those guys. They used to do it all the time. Yeah, now they don't anymore for a reason. You don't use those cast iron radiators out of a house for a condenser anymore for a reason, right? There you go. That's right. Saving it up. Yeah, I gotta give my liver a break, man. I've been drinking a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of gas underneath there too, in that ocean floor, and it's frozen. It's called methane clathrates. Read about that. It's just frozen underneath the surface. And once our oceans get to a certain temperature at that depth, once they warm up to a certain point where they get to a certain temperature at that depth, a lot of that methane is going to start bubbling up, dissolving and bubbling up, and then that's going to really mess up our atmosphere if we get a lot of that happening at one time. Not going to be good. So I can see them lighting it on fire and burning it as it pops up, having buoy igniters, ready to keep it from building up and burn it off. I'm seeing the future, bro. You wait and see. 50 years from now, you'll be like, damn, old Santa was right, man. They got buoys out there that are lighting off that methane as it bubbles up. Kind of like they do, in a lot of areas now around gas wells and stuff. Yeah. What really bothers me, JJ, is a lot of in England, it was one of the biggest violators, but they know how, inert these HDPL, HDLP, high density HDLP and LDPE polyethylene. Anyway, yeah, plastic barrels are. So they're dumping these over with nuclear waste and shit at them with all kinds of waste that they can't get rid of any other way. So they just put it in a barrel, put it on a boat, take it out in the ocean, and dump it over, and it'll be fine, for a couple few hundred years. Let the people in the future worry about it. Let's save us some money now, so we won't have to worry about it. A lot of them, man. And I think if you see a ship doing that, sink that MFer right on site with everybody in it, and don't send no lifeboats. And find the shit out of the company that sent it. Find them and close them, shut them down, because it's happening a lot. They just thousands and thousands barrels of horrible, horrible toxins in our oceans just sitting there, ticking time bombs, waiting. And there's going to be a point in time when it's going to be too dangerous to go down there and try to retrieve them. And then what? Yeah, then what? And a few 100,000 years or so, we become a toxic waste. All the fish die. All the sea life in the ocean that helps give us oxygen die. Our planet dies. We die. The planet will still be here. It'll change and transform, but not going to be pretty. Yeah, that kind of waste kills me. Littering like that. That's much worse than, a coal power plant or something like that. Probably much worse than a little plastic in your liquor too, huh? Yeah, we're going to create Godzilla. Yeah, I mean, everybody thinks that going green is helping the planet, saving the planet. And it's like, well, instead of mining coal, you're now mining lithium. So you're mining something. This is much more toxic than coal. How are you going to get rid of it once the battery's dead? goes into these dump sites, gets, if it doesn't get recycled, it leaches out. And it's much worse for the environment than coal ever was. So what are you going to do? And the windmills, there's always not enough wind, but there's fiberglass, big, huge fiberglass blades. Well, what does it take to make those big, huge fiberglass blades? It takes petroleum, it takes industries that use petroleum just to build it. And then how are you going to dispose of those properly? There's big, huge landfills full of fiberglass blades, and they're massive. They're huge, these things are. Not to mention the birds and shit that it kills. Well, hydrogen cells is the way to go. That's definitely the way of the future, converting water into a fuel. You just separate the oxygen, the hydrogen, and that's definitely the future. I mean, it would be nice if, solar panels were efficient enough where you could just convert the sun and it would be perfect and kumbaya, and it would be worth the cost of the cell, the panels, and they would last long enough to pay off. But none of that happens. It's just not there. Yeah, I can't make my liver quiver. I don't know. I might have a little shot or so. A little shot won't hurt. Just a little one. Let's see how just this. Yeah. Just a little bit. Lubricate my joints a little bit. I got to mow grass tomorrow. Yeah, it is. Definitely is. And we can't talk about dumbassery if we don't start talking about politics and religion. So that's the source of a lot of it. Yeah. Right now, natural gas, probably one of the cleanest fuels that we have in abundance that we can use for, electrical generation. Gas, coal to the point where we've got it to the point where we were burning it pretty cleanly in a lot of these power plants. I'm not going to blow smoke up anybody else say it was the cleanest fuel ever. No, it's still not, but it's nothing like before. But natural gas is probably going to be our go-to energy user for the next 50, 100 years until we can come up with better technologies and master the hydrogen fuel cell and conversion of separation of hydrogen and oxygen in water and use those as fuels. Monday brandy. Well, we're never going to get away from oil. There's just too much like plastics, I mean, plastics is from the oil industry. How are we going to get away from that? We need it. It's for containers, and we become so accustomed to it. I'm all for glass. It's a natural, sand and silica it's melted and used, and that's great. But as far as paper, use cutting down trees, I just soon get my peanut butter out of a plastic tub than a paper carton, right? So that's one thing I don't like is selling all our fuel overseas like that, and I think we ought to create our own market and pretty much keep our own gas here and our own coal here and our own oil here. And if we need a surplus, we buy it from other places. But I just don't see the point in selling it and buying it at the same time. Wholesaling it out and then retailing it back in. No. There's money being exchanged that way. But I think we should keep it, abroad or at home and let them do their own and let us kind of to do our own thing. Especially now that we found that we've got pretty good reserves of a lot of rare earth minerals and a lot of metals and stuff that we need for a lot of this battery technology. We found lots of resources, even in some of the old, interestingly enough, in some of the old coal slurries. There's something called produced coke, and it's just a burnt coal. And those have all kinds of these rare earth minerals in it. They're finding metals and stuff. So those old dumps have now become very wealthy beds of rare earth metals. Who are you talking to, Clint? Did someone ask a question? Did I miss a question? Yeah, it's nice. Some of it was my grandparents. I got a lot of stuff from them. I got some stuff just sitting above me, man. Check this out. Out here, got some oh man, old clocks like that. That clock is ancient. That thing is very, very old. I've got some old opera glasses that they used to take to the opera that are pearl. It must be over here. I got another old clock up there too. I used to collect a bunch of old clocks. Who asked about a thumper, Clint? Yeah, it was actually coal, burnt coal. It comes in a little round ball. Yeah, it's great for forging. Thank you. There's another one up here too. It's not quite as old as that one, but it's a nice one too. Oh, shit. It's pretty a little bit more ornate than the other one. But I've got some over there on the bar area that are really valuable to somebody that's a collector. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go. I got a couple of these too. They're like old little binoculars. They used them. They're opera glasses. And pearl, mother of pearl. They're pretty cool. There's a couple sets of those they used back in the old days when they'd go to the plays and stuff. Back in the early 1900s, late 1800s. They'd go to the plays and they'd sit so far away. They'd put them little binoculars and watch the play. Elderberry. Oh, eldest sister. Monday's round will be elderberry. First time to see shine dripping. Awesome. Yeah, there's a fascination with the drip. Yeah, there's a lot up there. We need to get Greenland there. Iceland. There's a lot there too. We definitely don't want China and Russia getting it. And that shouldn't be political. I mean, all Americans shouldn't want that, regardless of what their party is. We should definitely want to try to capitalize on that. Yeah. Is that a thumbs up or a middle finger? I can't tell. Yeah, I agree, JJ. But the thing is, how long ago was it? Oh, we've only got enough oil on the earth to last us another 40 years. That was like 60 years ago, saying that shit. And oh, the oceans are gonna all rise 10 feet by 2020, and there's like, okay, they were wrong in the 80s and 90s, You hear a lot of that, and then they find, oh, well, we found just another oil reserve or a huge reserve of oil that's going to add another 60 years or whatever. But we do have a lot of methane, and there is tons of methane I was talking about earlier offshore in this flows and clathrates that are in the ocean floor, and they're so deep that it keeps them frozen. And if we can find a way to, mine those, that would be another really great source of methane for us. Yeah. Fuzzy, I got them. That's right. Panic sales. Yeah. Sure does. Yeah, I think we got enough methane and oil and coal to last us plenty long enough to when we can come up with a good alternative. And that alternative is hydrogen cell technology. It will be the conversion of water and to separate it, because we know oxygen, highly flammable, it's explosive, and hydrogen. So being able to convert those and use those as a fuel, definitely going to be a thing in the future. Yeah, hopefully she ain't gonna be driving home, is she? Yeah, it is, and it's producing it all the time. And there's a lot of recycling that you can do, and like in the plastics, you can get oil from your plastic. We were talking about that last week, about I guess the black kid on the internet that's got, he's converting his plastics and making a fuel out of it to power his car. It's awesome. And everybody's acting like that's, some sort of sorcery. It's like, that's not that hard to do. It's not much more difficult than what we do, conversion and distillation. You're just basically distilling oil instead of alcohol. You're burning up the plastics, you're taking the resins from it, converting those into a liquid, and then distilling that liquid into a refined gas. That's basically the reverse process of making the plastics, right? So they take a lot of petroleum products and make plastics out of it just the same. Yeah, it's actually not that difficult to do, but I think the kid's genius for setting itself up in a backyard, system like that to recycle and do it. It's awesome. And, I'm not taking anything away from the kid. I think it's awesome, but it's not sorcery. It's not that difficult. You know, some people think making moonshine and getting something you can fuel a car from, corn grain. That's sorcery. Yeah. Pretty easy to us, ain't it? All right, y'all. It's getting about 11. We've had a pretty good Saturday. Started out pretty good education wise, and I wanted to, help Charlton a little bit on his and one thing I get back to, and I probably didn't expound on. He used the powdered amylase, which probably didn't. It was what he didn't get a very good starting gravity, and then probably he didn't use any enough beta amylase with his grains and didn't add any glucose, so he didn't get a lot of those debranched chains broken up into uh, fermentables, which is probably why he got a stuck fermentation. The hydrometer will tell you that you've got sugars there, but it won't tell you if those sugars are fermentable. And so that's the situation. You see that there's sugar there, but It's just, it's all science. It's just wasn't convertible sugar. So that was actually what happened to him, what caused his stuck fermentation. It wasn't really stuck. It was just, it fermented as far as it was going to go. And it sat there longer and longer, and the acid, built up, and the yeast got stressed, and it just kind of pH crashed on him a little bit as well from the organic acid creation. But basically, it wasn't necessarily stuck. It was just, it already eaten all the sugar that it could eat, and the rest of the sugars were too complex for it to eat. So the yeast starved, they stressed, they caused probably organic acid production, caused it to crash, and pH to increase. So that was the situation, and you really didn't need to add the pickling lime, as much pickling lime, as you kept adding it and adding it and adding it, trying to get it up, and then adding the DAP to it, thinking it needed nutrients when there wasn't any yeast there to eat it. So we kind of messed it all up, and we're going to do better. We'll get it. And that's why, really, before you start doing multi-grains and even heirloom corn, cut your teeth on that yellow corn and learn to convert it, and then just graduate into it. But he's done it a little while. He knows. It's just graduating into more complex grain bills. Good. Thanks for dropping in. We're here on every Tuesday and Saturday at 8 Eastern. We won't be here this Saturday. Coming Saturday, the 28th, I think it is. Yeah, 29th it is. We're going to be at a festival in Ohio, Wilmington, Farm to Bottle Festival. So that's where we're going to be Saturday, next weekend. So, but we'll be back Tuesday, this Tuesday at 8 Eastern, and jump in here if you got any questions, you want to learn about it. And I know a lot of people like to, make shine to drink, and also to make tinctures and a lot of other things with. So, yes, but we're here every Tuesday and Saturday unless we're at a festival. So we will be back Tuesday, the 25th. So until then, everybody have a great weekend. Peace out. Shine on. Love y'all. And we'll see you Tuesday.